Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to what is arguably one of the most important videos that I make on the channel this year, because today we're going to be looking at this. This is the WEF Global Risk Report for 2023. So if you've been a subscriber here for a long time, you'll know that I cover this report every year and I show you the forecasts that they make, which are like Nostradamus. It's as if they're fortune tellers, right back to what happened in 2020, to what happened in 21, what happened in 22, and now they have their forecasts out for 23. So I highly recommend watching this entire video to the end, because I do feel that this information is absolutely crucial for you, for your preparedness, for you to understand what's going on in the world, and so that you can sort of take measures to avoid some of these things that are coming down the line. And yes, I know my desk is really messy today, but this is a huge document and I go through every single word line by line, so I need a lot of pens and all sorts of other things for it. So we're going to go through, we'll start with the executive summary, and I'll pull it up on screen for you so you can actually see it as well. And then we'll go through all of these risks, I'll give my commentary on them, and then we'll finish up with the different countries and what the risk levels are for each country, from USA, UK, we've got Netherlands, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. We've got all the main countries here where I have subscribers from. So let's get started then. Let's go straight to the shared screen here and let's begin this report. So if you actually want to read this report for yourself, if you just do a search for WEF Global Risks Report 2023, you can either print it off or just follow along with this video here. I've done all the hard work for you. I've pulled out all the key points so that you don't have to. So we're going to start then with page 6 and we're going to look at the executive summary here. And we're going to predominantly focus on the 2-year as opposed to looking at the 10-year. And you can see the risk categories at the bottom. Blue is economic, green is environmental, orange is geopolitical, red is societal, and purple is technological. 2 years then, the first one is a cost of living crisis, which I think is pretty obvious. We're already in this cost of living crisis. There isn't really any surprises here. But one thing I want to draw your attention to is point number 3 here, which is geopolitical confrontation, and point number 10, large-scale involuntary migration. It's interesting they always use the word involuntary, as if people don't have any choice when they decide to move to another country. But actually, I want to talk about that a little bit, because I do think we're going to be seeing some resource-based conflicts. And I want to give you an example actually from what happened in history. As you know, I'm a history buff. So we're going to talk about the Sea Peoples and a few things and theories I have around that. But the other one I want to bring your attention to is number 5 here. So this is erosion of social cohesion and societal polarization. And they never point out the fact that these things are being deliberately done by the media. You wouldn't even know certain events are taking place if the media didn't keep pushing it on you all the time. And then number 8 is widespread cybercrime and cybersecurity, i.e. a major cyber attack. So let's just pause here for a moment then. And actually let me just show you one other thing. So I want to link this into the 10-year here. So as you can see on the 10 years, we're not going to focus much on this right now, but I do want you to notice that at the 10-year point, they still have this large-scale, involuntary, as they call it, migration. So we know that this is going to continue for the next decade. So if you're not happy with what you're seeing in your country right now, then sorry to tell you, but this is only going to continue. But the other thing I want to bring your attention to is number 9, which is the geo-economical confrontation, which they have as a very, very high point here at number 3. So this is pretty much going to happen. And what I did, and they didn't do this in the report, but what I did was I went to the country reports later on and I looked at all the ones that had this as a risk level, and there wasn't many at all. And you might be surprised to find out that there's two very key players that both have this on there, whereas a lot of the others don't. So without them saying where this geopolitical and geoeconomic risk and conflict is going to come in, I think we can figure this out for ourselves. So let me give you the example then. If you've ever watched history documentaries or you've looked into any of this, you'll hear about something called the Sea Peoples. It's a really fascinating watch or read, and it's somewhat of a mystery as well, and that's what makes it even more fascinating. And lots of different historians have their own views and ideas as to who these people were and why they were kind of disjointed, because they weren't actually the same tribe of people. They were multiple tribes of people, all coming together to do raids. So think similar to the Vikings, where you used to have the tribes coming together to then go raiding. Well, this is an example of that, but way before. And there's a fantastic documentary on this as well, where they talk about how they were finally destroyed because they'd wiped out all these other cities, and it wasn't really countries back then, but there was all these different cities, mainly around Egypt. And finally, because there was no one else to conquer, they went to conquer this Egyptian city. But the pharaoh was ready, and he'd set a trap for these people. And when they came to raid, he actually, well, their army was completely destroyed. The Sea Peoples were completely destroyed. So that's one for you to watch, because it is absolutely fascinating. But the point that a lot of people don't ever think about, and usually these ideas come to me afterwards. I'm usually, taking a shower, or I'm about to go to sleep, and the ideas pop in my head. And I thought about this and said, this mystery around why all these peoples came together to raid, well, I don't actually know, but I have a theory around it. Why was it that when they did the raids, they didn't focus on taking gold and silver and things like this? Why was it that they focused very heavily on taking food, grains and things like this? And then if you look at the period this took place and you see the weather patterns that took place during this period, my theory, and again it's just a theory, is that perhaps there was some problems with food at that time. Perhaps we're seeing some of the similar patterns that we're seeing now. And as a result of that, we saw this voluntary migration or raids to collect resources. Now, when we bring this back to this report we're seeing here, I'm seeing some of the same patterns. I'm seeing that we're going to have, and they talk about this all the way through the report, geoeconomic confrontations. And this is very highly ranked as a risk level with some major developed countries. And this is without me even bringing in all of my theories around artificial intelligence and how this is going to completely change the game and change economies in the future. But we've got a lot to go through, so I'm going to push forward here, and we're going to move on to page 11 now. And I'd like to bring your attention to figure D, so points 1 through 4. Now, if you look at these, what they're calling currently manifesting risks, you have an energy supply crisis, a cost of living crisis, rising inflation, and food supply crisis. Now, it doesn't take a genius to connect the dots on this and ask the question, what do all 4 of these have in common? And the answer is, they are all man-made crises by governments. The energy supply crisis was man-made. The cost of living crisis was again man-made as a result of government policy and central bank policy. The rising inflation is of course connected. And then the food supply crisis as well. But this actually has some other implications around the food supply crisis as well. And then they have this, and again, these are the top 5 currently manifesting risks. This is the cyber attack, which I warned you all about. Be very careful about this cyber attack that I believe is coming. Now, again, we're going to focus on the short term as opposed to the long term here. As we go down a little lower here in the blue, these are financial. I really think they are overlooking these items: the debt crisis, failure to stabilize price trajectories, and the prolonged economic downturn. I feel as though they are overlooking these things. Let's shift back a page now then to page 10, and let's look at this map. So this is the interconnections map. On my page here, I've got this all mapped out with my own notes. But you want to really pay attention to the largest circles here. So they have state collapse. Look at this right in the center. States collapsing. Interstate conflict as well. Geo-economic confrontation. So this will be over resources, over economics. They have, I think we can probably say this is the largest risk on here, collapse of systemically important supply chains, erosion of social cohesion. And the irony of this one, misinformation and disinformation. Yeah, well, this is put out by them and by the media. Again, it's the whole ministry of truth. Keep saying something enough and people will eventually believe it. But look what they don't have as a main thing here. Asset bubble burst. Very small, so they don't see that prolonged economic downturn. They don't see that as a big risk either. And that's why the report is somewhat conflicting, because some aspects put things very high priority and then others put them fairly low priority. Infectious diseases they have as a fairly low priority or low risk level. What do they have as a high risk level here? Severe mental health deterioration. Collapse, again, huge one. Collapse or lack of public infrastructure and services. We are definitely seeing that right now, especially if you're in the UK. You're probably seeing this already, especially in the medical sector, the National Health Service, which is really on its knees right now. I would say it is in a slow motion collapse currently. The other one is chronic health conditions. Of course, they're not saying what is causing this huge increase in chronic health conditions, but I think by now most of us are aware of this. But then look at this one, use of weapons of mass destruction. So this is nuclear weapons, very small again, so they don't see this as a major risk, although it is obviously on here as a risk. But I did highlight a comment on my report here. Here it is. Some of the risks described in this year's report are close to a tipping point. So if you want to know which is close to a tipping point, look at the largest circles here, and that gives you a very good idea. We're going to jump forward now to page 74, which is Appendix A. So let's begin then with the financial aspect, and this is in alphabetical order, just to bear in mind. It is not in priority order or how risky they think this is. So asset bubble burst, they have this on here. Prices for housing, investment funds, shares and other assets become increasingly disconnected from the real economy. Well, I think we are pretty much there already, leading to a severe drop in demand and prices. Includes, but is not limited to, cryptos, energy prices, housing prices and stock market. Well, yeah, this is the plan. They want to see a severe drop in demand and prices. They want to see a drop in demand of energy, and they also want to see it in other assets as well, definitely cryptocurrencies. Collapse of a systemically important industry or supply chain, another big risk. Debt crises then, this is quite an important one. Let's just read this. Corporate or public finances struggle to service debt accumulation, resulting in mass bankruptcies or insolvencies, liquidity crises, or default and sovereign debt crises. Now, this is where my forecasts on bail-ins and deleveraging and other things like that come in. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen this week, this month, even this year. What I'm saying is this is going to happen. It is just a matter of time. This is just mathematics. It is inevitable that this will eventually happen. But let's move on to the next page, and we're going to keep going through table A, and let's have a read of what they say about the geo-economic confrontation then, and let's see if what I said we can match this up at all. So deployment of economic levers by global or regional powers to decouple economic interactions between nations. Interesting. Restricting goods, knowledge, well, we're already seeing this. We're already seeing that. We're restricting knowledge already. Services, or technology. This is the semiconductor chips. With the intent of gaining geopolitical advantage, well, this is what the USA is doing over China right now. Includes, but is not limited to, currency measures. Well, we saw that with Russia. Investment controls, we're seeing that. Sanctions, yes. State aid, Ukraine. Subsidies, trade controls on energy, minerals, and technology. I mean, we're pretty much seeing all of this already. Now, let's look at interstate conflict, because this is an interesting one. Belligerent bilateral or multilateral conflict between states manifesting as cyber attacks, proxy wars, or hot war. And I think this is just the beginning. I'm going to make a video at some point, and I want to share my views on how AI will be in control of warfare in the future, simply because it can think and act much faster than even the top generals and thinkers. State collapse then. Collapse of a state with geopolitical significance due to the erosion of institutions and rule of law. Internal civil unrest, military coups, or the efforts of severe regional or global instability. Guys, pay very close attention to all of this, because these guys are very rarely wrong on what they forecast. These forecasts have been very, very accurate, because they don't expect people like you or I to read this. This is not designed for us. These reports are designed for world leaders and people of influential positions. Now, we could go through all of these, and I'm sure you'd like me to, some of you, but I'm just going to pick out the key ones, like chronic diseases and health conditions. Widespread increase in chronic health conditions includes, but is not limited to, conditions linked to excessive consumption habits. Oh yeah, of course, that's what it is. That's definitely part of it. Yes, I 100% agree with that, but it's not what's given the rise in the last very short period here. Economic activity that releases harmful pollutants. This is, I mean, you can't make this one up. Releases harmful pollutants in the air. Yes, I wonder what it is that releases harmful pollutants in the air. I just cannot guess what this one is. Water or food through agricultural, industrial, and household practices. Well, I'm okay here on the Isle of Man because the government has banned fluoride in the water. The last one I want to talk about then is the collapse, public infrastructure and services. So non-existent or widespread bankruptcy of social security systems and erosion of social security benefits, alongside inequitable or insufficient public infrastructure and services. We're seeing this already. I've been talking about this for a year. Includes, but is not limited to, lack of disability and family benefits, as well as affordable and adequate housing, public education, child and elder care, health care, transportation systems, and urban development. 15-minute cities, anybody? And just as we leave then, if we, just one point on the employment crisis then, they've got here displacement due to automation. They're not really talking about AI, but I believe this is going to be one of the biggest displacers, more than anyone has even forecast or realizes is going to be coming. Now, we're going to jump back to page 13 here. I know I'm jumping around, but there's a reason for it. The way they've done the report, I don't think is very efficient, and the order. So that's why I'm putting it in a much better order for you to read here. So this is currently manifesting risk. And if you just imagine that there is a line from this bottom corner here all the way through to this top corner, I'm not sure why they didn't put that line in, but that will help you to understand this better. So this is the higher number of respondents on the left axis, and then you've got the higher ranking here to the right. So what are they saying is the biggest risk and the lowest risk? Well, they're saying that continued waves of 19 is now a very low risk. So pretty much they're saying that is over and done with. And I would agree, I think it is over and done with, especially with some of the stuff coming out now. It is unbelievable. So what are they saying is the highest risk here? Well, I guess we can say it's between the energy supply crisis, which remember is a man-made crisis, or it's the cost of living crisis, which again is created. Both of these crises were created by government and by WEF leadership who have put out this report. That is why they're so accurate a lot of the time. Now, this is interesting because I wasn't expecting this. So bear in mind, this is not just this year's report. This is continuing. They're seeing rising inflation, which fits in with this. Apparently, people call it a crazy theory. I don't see why it's crazy. But my theory that we're going to see more inflation, we're going to see it reduce, and then we're going to see it peak again. So this tends to fit in with that forecast that I have. Then we have the food supply crisis, which I just don't see a solution to it. I really don't see a solution to this. Cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. Still got money in the bank? Got your life savings there? Yeah, you might want to rethink that one. Feel free to check out my finance course in the description if you don't know what I'm talking about as well. Disruptions in global supply chains for non-food goods. And then as we come down much lower, we have weaponization of economic policy, debt crisis, deployment of chemical and biological weapons. They have very low. I think they're underestimating some of these aspects actually. So let's finish up then. We're going to go to table B.2 on page 80, and we're going to look at some of the countries I mentioned. So these are in alphabetical order. So let's look at Australia first then. What are the biggest risks of Australia? Well, number one is a continued cost of living crisis, which I agree with. Australia actually has this as a number two, a debt crisis, or as they have it, debt crises. The next one then, rapid and or sustained inflation. So these all go hand in hand. Number four, geo-economic confrontation. Now the question is, who is this with? Who is in their region that the WEF is expecting economic or geo-economic confrontation with? Well, let's take a look at who that could be. Let's keep moving forward and let's jump over to China, which has a lot on their list here. So China has number one, geo-economic confrontation. What a surprise. Number two, natural disasters, extreme events, rapid and or sustained inflation, infectious disease. Now this is an interesting one. They're talking about this rapid and or sustained inflation. I'm not so sure about that. They seem to have a pretty good grasp on it at the moment, but we'll see. Maybe I'm overlooking something here. Number four, infectious diseases. Number five, geopolitical contestation of resources. An asset bubble burst. I think this is definitely a real one, a real risk for China. And then digital power concentration. Definitely. China is investing into AI and the digital space like crazy. But we also have Canada here. Let's take a look at Canada. Number one, cost of living crisis. Number two, debt crises. Three, rapid and or sustained inflation. Number four, failure of climate stuff. Number five, asset bubble burst. Let's go down to the Netherlands next then. And this is an interesting one. So they have number one for the Netherlands. And I've done a big report on this. You've probably watched that, where I said it's complete nonsense what they are saying. So they're trying to say the Netherlands is creating all of this climate change and the climate crisis and all these other things that they're saying about the Netherlands. And now they're really attacking the farmers. They're calling them right-wing extremists. They're saying that the government's going to have to take action to kick them off the land because they need to reduce the farms by 3,000, even though you look how many farms there are, and they want to reduce it by 10,000 by 2030. There's only about 10,000 farms in the Netherlands. So this is a very targeted campaign against the Netherlands farmers. And they are using this whole climate crisis as a smokescreen to get the farmers off the land definitely watch my report on that, on the tri-state city and the reason they want the land and everything else. It's not what you're being told. Number 2 then is rapid or sustained inflation. Netherlands is suffering really badly from this at the moment. Geo-economic confrontation, yes, I see it. Very similar for the next point. And the cost of living crisis. After the Netherlands then is New Zealand. I know I've got some New Zealand subscribers. Again, it's the same thing. Cost of living crisis, rapid inflation, natural disasters, extreme weather, asset bubble burst, and debt crises. So New Zealand has pretty much got the worst of the worst going on here. No wonder the Prime Minister jumped ship. Now, one country that isn't on here, it's been removed now, is Russia. So we can't look at Russia, but we will jump straight down to the United Kingdom then, so the UK, or as they call it, United Kingdom of Great Britain. Cost of living, debt crisis, inflation. Now, this is interesting because this is the first I have heard of this. Number 5, interstate conflict. Now, what exactly does that mean? I'm not sure at this stage, but please drop it in the comments below. It could be something simple like political with Scotland, or it could be something with Ireland or Northern Ireland. I'm not exactly sure at this point, but drop it in the comments below if you've got any ideas. And then let's go down to the USA. Debt crises, definitely. Inflation, yes. Geo-economic confrontation. Now, we said before, who might this be with? And the same with a couple of other states and countries, because not many of them have that on there. If you look here, none of them in this box here have them. So who might it be with? I think it's highly likely to be with China. Now, we don't know about Russia because it's been taken off the list. But I think it's highly likely that it's going to be with China, because we've already seen the beginnings of this starting already. And I don't think this is going to suddenly end like a lot of people do. I think a lot of things we're seeing right now are going to escalate, because you are going to start to see this sort of technological conflict start coming in between the US and with China. And that's why the US struck first and they cut China off from the advanced semiconductor chips. And that's why China is looking very, very eagerly at Taiwan, because that is where those semiconductor chips are made. And that's why TSMC wants to bring those factories over to the US, and why the US government is very happy for them to do so. But one thing that's interesting here is this report doesn't really see a major scale war, which is very interesting. I thought it would be one of the top things here, but it's really not. They're seeing resource conflicts, they're seeing cost of living crisis, but over the next 1 to 2 years, they're thinking that climate is the biggest risk. Everything just seems to be climate. I don't. Yes, I think we're going to see some changes to the climate. I think you've probably seen these reports. There's an El Nino coming. There's going to be some changes, but is this man-made? I just don't think so. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Please remember to like the video, but definitely share it with anyone you think needs to see it. And apart from that, I hope it was really valuable for you today. Would I say I enjoy making this report every year? Not really. I don't enjoy reading any of the WEF reports, but they do help me. They do help you to kind of see what's coming down the line in the future. So thank you so much for watching today. Really appreciate it. God bless you and your family. And I'll see you tomorrow for my favorite video of the week, the Friday walk and talk. Take care. See you then.